13. Considered in itself, the Roman world dominion was a negative phenomenon, being the result not of a surplus of energy on the one side, that the Romans had never had since Zama, but of a deficiency of resistance on the other. That the Romans did not conquer the world is certain. They merely took possession of a booty that lay open to everyone. The Imperium Romanum came into existence not as the result of such an extremity of military and financial effort as had characterized the Punic Wars, but because the Old East forewent all external self-determinations. We must not be deluded by the appearance of brilliant military successes. With a few ill-trained, ill-led and sullen legions, Lucullus and Pompey conquered whole realms, a phenomenon that in the period of the Battle of Ipsus would have been unthinkable. The Mithridatic danger, serious enough for a system of material force which had never been put to any real test, would have been nothing to the conquerors of Hannibal. After Zama, the Romans never again either waged or were capable of waging a war against a great military power. Footnote: the conquest of Gaul by Caesar was frankly a colonial, i.e. a one-sided war, and the fact that it is the highest achievement in the later military history of Rome only shows that the well of real achievement was rapidly drying up. End of footnote. Their classic wars were those against the Samnites, Pyrrhus and Carthage. Their grand hour was Cannae. To maintain the heroic posture for centuries on end is beyond the power of any people. The Prussian-German people have had three great moments, 1813, 1870 and 1914, and that is more than others have had. Here, then, I lay it down that imperialism, of which petrifacts such as the Egyptian Empire, the Roman, the Chinese, the Indian, may continue to exist for hundreds or thousands of years. Dead bodies, amorphous and dispirited masses of men, scrap material from a great history, is to be taken as the typical symbol of the passing away. Imperialism is civilization unadulterated. In this phenomenal form, the destiny of the West is now irrevocably set. The energy of culture man is directed inwards, that of civilization man outwards. And thus I see in Cecil Rhodes the first man of a new age. He stands for the political style of a far-ranging Western, Teutonic, and especially German future. And his phrase, "expansion is everything," is the Napoleonic reassertion of the indwelling tendency of every civilization that has fully ripened, Roman, Arab, or Chinese. It is not a matter of choice. It is not the conscious will of individuals, or even that of whole classes or peoples, that decides. The expansive tendency is a doom, something demonic and immense, which grips, forces into service, and uses up the late mankind of the world-city stage willy-nilly, aware or unaware. Footnote: the modern Germans are a conspicuous example of a people that has become expansive without knowing it or willing it. They were already in that state while they still believed themselves to be the people of Goethe. Even Bismarck, the founder of the New Age, never had the slightest idea of it, and believed himself to have reached the conclusion of a political process. Footnote: life is the process of effecting possibilities, and for the brain man there are only extensive possibilities. Footnote: this is probably the meaning of Napoleon's significant words to Goethe. What have we today to do with destiny? Policy is destiny. End of footnote. Hard as the half-developed socialism of today is fighting against expansion, one day it will become arch-expansionist with all the vehemence of destiny. Here the form language of politics, as the direct intellectual expression of a certain type of humanity, touches on a deep metaphysical problem, on the fact, affirmed in the grant of unconditional validity to the causality principle, that the soul is the complement of its extension. When, between 480 and 230, corresponding to the 300 to 50 BC phase of the classical world, the Chinese group of states was tending towards imperialism, it was entirely futile to combat the principle of imperialism, lianheng, practiced in particular by the Roman state of Qin, which in the end gave its name to the empire, Qin, China, and theoretically represented by the philosopher Chang Yi, by ideas of a League of Nations, Ho-Tsong, largely derived from Wang Hu, a profound skeptic who had no illusions as to the men or the political possibilities of this late period. Both sides opposed the anti-political idealism of Lao Tzu, but as between themselves it was Lianheng and not Ho-Tsong which swam with the natural current of expansive civilization. Rhodes is to be regarded as the first precursor of a Western type of Caesars, whose day is to come, though yet distant. He stands midway between Napoleon and the forcemen of the next centuries, just as Flaminius, who from 232 BC onward pressed the Romans to undertake the subjugation of Cisalpine Gaul and so initiated the policy of colonial expansion, stands between Alexander and Caesar. Strictly speaking, Flaminius was a private person, for his real power was of a kind not embodied in any constitutional office, who exercised a dominant influence in the state at a time when the state idea was giving way to the pressure of economic factors. So far as Rome is concerned, he was the archetype of opposition Caesarism. With him there came to an end the idea of state service, and there began the will to power, which ignored traditions and reckoned only with forces. Alexander and Napoleon were romantics, though they stood on the threshold of civilization, and in its cold, clear air, the one fancied himself an Achilles, and the other read Werther. Caesar, on the contrary, was a pure man of fact, gifted with immense understanding. But even for Rhodes, political success means territorial and financial success, and only that. Of this Romanness within himself he was fully aware. But Western civilization has not yet taken shape in such strength and purity as this. It was only before his maps that he could fall into a sort of poetic trance, this son of the parsonage who, sent out to South Africa without means, made a gigantic fortune, and employed it as the engine of political aims. His idea of a trans-African railway from the Cape to Cairo, his project of a South African empire, his intellectual hold on the hard metal souls of the mining magnates whose wealth he forced into the service of his schemes, his capital, Bulawayo, royally planned as a future residence by a statesman who was all-powerful, yet stood in no definite relation to the state, his wars, his diplomatic deals, his road systems, his syndicates, his armies, his conception of the great duty to civilization of the man of brain. All this, broad and imposing, is the prelude of a future which is still in store for us, and with which the history of West European mankind will be definitely closed. He who does not understand that this outcome is obligatory and insusceptible of modification, that our choice is between willing this and willing nothing at all, between cleaving to this destiny or despairing of the future and of life itself, he who cannot feel that there is grandeur also in the realizations of powerful intelligences, in the energy and discipline of metal-hard natures, in battles fought with the coldest and most abstract means. He who is obsessed with the idealism of a provincial and would pursue the ways of life of past ages must forego all desire to comprehend history, to live through history, or to make history. Thus regarded, the Imperium Romanum appears no longer as an isolated phenomenon, but as the normal product of a strict and energetic, megalopolitan, predominantly practical spirituality, as typical of a final and irreversible condition which has occurred often enough, though it has only been identified as such in this instance. Let it be realized, then, that the secret of historical form does not lie on the surface, that it cannot be grasped by means of similarities of costume and setting, and that in the history of men, as in that of animals and plants, there occur phenomena showing deceptive similarity, but inwardly without any connection, e.g. Charlemagne and Harun al-Rashid, Alexander and Caesar, the German wars upon Rome and the Mongol onslaughts upon West Europe, and other phenomena of extreme outward dissimilarity, but of identical import, e.g. Trajan and Ramesses II, the Bourbons and the Attic demos, Mohammed and Pythagoras. That the 19th and 20th centuries, hitherto looked on as the highest point of an ascending straight line of world history, are in reality a stage of life which may be observed in every culture that has ripened to its limit, a stage of life characterized not by socialists, impressionists, electric railways, torpedoes and differential equations, for these are only body constituents of the time, but by a civilized spirituality which possesses not only these, but also quite other creative possibilities. That, as our own time represents a transitional phase which occurs with certainty under particular conditions, there are perfectly well-defined states, such as have occurred more than once in the history of the past, later than the present-day state of West Europe, and therefore that the future of the West is not a limitless tending upwards and onwards for all time towards our present ideals, but a single phenomenon of history, strictly limited and defined as to form and duration, which covers a few centuries and can be viewed and, in essentials, calculated from available precedents.